Even after 12 rounds of talks, China seems to go on with its aggressive plans. They're talking across the table, agreeing to pull back small numbers of troops from the actual friction zones. But when you zoom out just a little bit, the real design of China becomes ever more apparent. As you will see in this exclusive report filed by India Today's Ankit Kumar, he's accessed satellite footage of a new airbase that's coming up in the region with very close access to Ladakh, POK and Afghanistan. And this isn't just an innocent airport. It's got underground facilities that are very suspicious. Take a look. A brand new Chinese airbase, a base that began construction just before the India-China standoff began in Ladakh last year. In close proximity to the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, not to mention Ladakh. A base whose true intention is now becoming much clearer. Satellite images accessed by India Today confirm that this base in Tashkurgan isn't just any airport by the Chinese. What they clearly reveal is a complex of underground facilities pointing to Chinese intentions in the region. These underground complexes are clearly intended to provide a level of concealment and protection to Chinese operations in this area. The first high-resolution commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs confirms suspicions that this is a dual-use airport and not just a civilian one. Along with the underground facilities, construction on other parts of the airbase is also visible in the satellite images. Blacktopping of runways, construction of terminal areas can be clearly seen, along with the deployment of stone-crushing machines, land-moving equipment and construction trucks. Once complete next year, the airport will be able to accommodate 160,000 passengers and 400 tons of cargo each year. But given how few tourists actually come here from China, the inbound passengers will be anything but civilian. Experts believe the strategic location of the airbase in Tashkurgan works in favor of the Chinese leadership. For instance, China could be concerned about the spread of Islamist movements following the rise of the Taliban, which could fuel more insurgencies in China's restive Xinjiang province. Recently, China, remember, hosted a visiting delegation of Taliban terrorists, praising their future role in the war-torn country. The new airbase in Tashkurgan overlooks the strategic Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan, a narrow territory that separates Tajikistan from Pakistan and POK. The corridor is connected to several geopolitical conflicts, including tension between India and Pakistan over Kashmir. With Ankit Kumar in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today. Ankit Kumar, who accessed these images, is live with me. Ankit, take us through the significance of this particular airbase. Those underground facilities obviously show that this is far from being a civilian airport, and there are many kinds of operations that the Chinese can clearly mount, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is POK and even Ladakh.
Well, Shiv, if you go through the archives of India Today, the first reference of Tashkurgan Airport, you will find back in 2015. The only reason why we are talking about this airport in 2021 is because the official construction at this airport did not take place for next 5 years. The official construction began only on 26th of April 2020. Why that date is important? That is just 10 days before the first clashes happened in May 2020 between Indian and Chinese armed forces at the northern bank of Pangong. And that was followed by several other armed face-to-face combats, be it in Sikkim, be it in Galwan Valley. So the satellite images that we are showing, they have been captured by the satellites of Planet Labs. What they show is that sitting at the strategic plateau top airport, the airbase at least has 4 underground facilities. Now what that does is that ensures strategic advantage to the Chinese forces, to the Chinese air forces. Remember, China has huge investments in Tajikistan, in POK, in Pakistan, and with growing clout of Taliban in Afghanistan, China has increased its ground movement on the borders of Afghanistan. So it needs air support to make sure that its infrastructure in Tajikistan as well as in Afghanistan and POK, it remains safe. Experts also believe that China is literally worried about the rise of Taliban. That's why the handshake with the Talibani leaders, because China has been facing little episodes of insurgencies in the western Xinjiang. So this airport, apart from seeing in context with the Indian situation, is also relevant when it comes to the Chinese relationship with Tajikistan, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
And these revelations coming just a few days after the Chinese foreign minister hosted that delegation of Taliban terrorists in China. Thank you very much, Ankit, for getting us that exclusive report. But apart from the Tashkurgan air base, which straddles the area between India, Pakistan, POK and Afghanistan, the air bases of the Chinese government and the Chinese Air Force, which feed directly into the Ladakh fight, are also being upgraded on a war footing. This is not our opinion. We're not suggesting this. This has been captured on camera. It has been published in some Chinese reports, and it's also been filmed on satellite imagery. Here's an exclusive report by India Today's Sandeep Unithan. It's also the cover story of the new issue of India Today magazine on how China, while talking peace across the table, is busy ramping up infrastructure on all its aviation war machinery very close to Ladakh. Take a look.
It's been 15 months of the world's biggest current military standoff. High up in the Himalayas, India and China remain locked in a freezing face-off in eastern Ladakh. But even though the situation has calmed down at the front lines since the beginnings of a disengagement in February, the bigger conflict has just gotten more hostile. And once again, it's China raising strategic temperatures. Battle Cry reported in April that while India was gripped by COVID-19's second wave, the Chinese army had reinforced in eastern Ladakh depth areas with permanent accommodations and depots. And now, China's aggressions have found an even bigger manifestation, a massive military aviation buildup, unfolding in clear view of imaging satellites. Consider this. China is building 3 new airports at Tashkurgan in Xinjiang, Tingri and Damsung in Tibet, and expanding and upgrading infrastructure at the existing air bases in Kashgar, Hotan, Garigunsa, Lhasa and Bangla. All air bases that can feed directly into the Ladakh standoff and more. Images accessed by India Today show a frenetic pace of construction unrivaled in recent years. New airfields being built and old ones expanded with new taxi tracks, aprons and longer runways. Fighter jets are being pushed under concrete pens with 3 feet thick walls that can withstand direct hits from missiles and air-dropped precision bombs. Launch pads around the bases bristle with HQ-9 long-range missiles which can shoot down aircraft over 100 kilometers away. Concrete has been trucked into various military sites across the plateau since May. One government source mentions having counted up to 800 trucks working at various sites across the plateau. In March this year, the Chinese government approved plans to construct 20 multi-purpose airfields in Tibet. All signals that point to one thing: China is preparing for war, or at the very least, a new escalation and expansion in this conflict.
China's aggressive aviation buildup is aimed at offsetting the Indian Air Force's advantages in the region. The IAF maintains a string of air bases at lower altitudes from which it can launch combat jets with meaningful weapon loads to Ladakh and beyond. China is attempting to chip away at this advantage.
The Rafale jets that joined Indian service last year have become a staple in Ladakh airspace. Their sensors keeping a hawk's eye on Chinese radiations and movements. Since August last year, China has periodically deployed its most advanced fighter aircraft, the 5th generation J-20, at bases like Hotan near the standoff zone. War games conducted by the Shillong-based Eastern Air Command some years ago described waves of Chinese bombers flying over the Himalayas and saturating IAF air bases with long-range cruise missile strikes. Worryingly for the Indian Air Force, over the past few months, the PLAAF and PLA Army have networked their missile units, creating vast air defense bubbles over the plateau. China's determined aviation build-up is a clear message to India that the piecemeal troop pullback in February may have been good to calm temperatures and reassure the world. It is too early to predict if the enhanced military aviation infrastructure will lead to a pattern of Chinese air intrusions of the kind seen over the South and East China Seas to intimidate Japan and Taiwan. But experts say nothing can be ruled out. This war has clearly only just begun.
Well, how is India responding? We're talking to China, but we're also looking at all these air bases and military infrastructure being ramped up in a very, very open and aggressive way by the Chinese, showing that they don't mind pulling back certain troops, but they will keep their larger divisions deployed around Ladakh, which is going to be a permanent threat. Well, India is rebalancing its forces as well. Before 2021, 9 of the Indian Army's 13+ corps were aimed to counter Pakistan. Now things have changed significantly because China, not little Pakistan, is the true adversary. Take a look.
The most hostile high-altitude battlefield on Earth, with close to 200,000 soldiers now deployed along both sides of the line of actual control. A giant chessboard of a standoff zone, where Chinese Wakey moves are being matched by Indian Chaturang counter moves. As the two Asian heavyweights engage in a high-altitude power game, tanks, troops, missiles and fighter jets are the pieces in the game. But the last 15 months of the Ladakh standoff has forced the Indian Army into one of its biggest ever reorientations. The Indian Army, which once extensively planned and prepared for warfare on the plains of Punjab and the sandy wastes of the Thar Desert, is now reconfiguring itself to fight along a second front. The high-altitude deserts of the world's toughest battlefield. The official term for this move towards the north is rebalancing. Before 2021, 9 of the Army's 13.5 corps faced Pakistan, while 4.5 faced China. Now the ratio has changed to 8 corps facing Pakistan and 6 China. Close to 50,000 fresh troops have been moved along the LAC. The most significant move has been the Mathura-based 1 Strike Corps aimed at Pakistan's heartland, being wheeled around and directed northwards towards Chinese-occupied Aksai Chin. A Rashtriya Rifles division-sized force of around 15,000 meant to fight insurgency has been dislodged from Jammu and Kashmir and moved to Ladakh. The Panagarh-based Mountain Strikes Corps has been reinforced with the 2nd Division in Ranchi, exclusively focused in the eastern sector.
After decades of a largely peaceful boundary dispute, the last 15 months have changed everything along the LAC. Parts of the LAC have been hardened, a military term which indicates that defenses have been manned, arms and ammunition repositioned, troops acclimatized to fight at high altitude, and the Air Force kept on alert.
Before 2020, there was just one infantry division in Ladakh. There are now 4 divisions there. The Leh-based 14 Corps has begun the process of winter stocking, stockpiling food and fuel for the winter, which sets in October, to cater to this expanded garrison. The rebalancing represents the Indian Army's largest since independence. China's actions, matched by India, have turned the undemarcated boundary into the world's longest, most dangerous military frontier, poised on the brink of conflict. More than fighting an all-out conventional war, the Indian Army's deployments appear to be aimed at stopping further Chinese incursions and using its troops to launch what are called quid pro quo operations to capture enemy territory, which can then be exchanged in negotiations. Even so, these deployments are fraught with risk because the specific border protocols codified in 1996 have collapsed after the 2020 PLA incursions.